السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. في لقاء يتجدد مع بنت النور. أنا هنا من أكرا، من عاصمة دولة غانا الجميلة. يسعدني أن أرحب بالسيد إيغوسا Imasuen، إنه الروائي والناشر النيجيري الذي ترك بصمة واضحة في مجال الأدب والنشر. السيد إيغوسا كاتب ذو رؤية عميقة وخبرة واسعة، حيث كتب عدة روايات، من أهمها رواية فاين بوي التي اشتهرت كثيرا وتحدث عن مواضيع عدة سنناقشها معه هذا اليوم. أيضا السيد إيغوسا شارك في تأسيس دار النشر التي تسمى ناريتيف لاندسكيب بريس، التي تلعب دورا مهما في نشر الأدب الإفريقي والنيجيري. أيضا أستاذي الكريم، وسعيد نستضيفه هذا اليوم في لقائي معه هنا ونتحدث عن هذه المواضيع. welcome Mr. Eghosa. How are you? It's my pleasure to meet you here, really. First thing I want to ask you, you are a doctor.
Yes.
And you are a writer.
Yes.
You are miss your way maybe something, or you did it and you know it. You are a doctor, but you find something very sparky, very inspiration in the writing.
No,
so you take that.
It's one of those stories where our societies had to catch up.
Yes.
So they were called developing economies, third world countries. So there was this policy, you never know it has an effect on you, where the government is pushing for science, technology, engineering, and math education. And one of the side effects is that any child that shows even a small amount of ability is pushed immediately into the sciences. So if there was anything as a child, I just liked reading. I liked reading volumes. And both my parents were quite bright. My dad was an engineer, my mom is a pharmacologist.
Wow.
And I'm the firstborn, so they learned with me because they had no idea what they were doing as first-time parents are.
Yeah, okay.
And doctor just seemed to be something that everybody wanted me to.
Yes.
There was no pressure.
Yeah.
If you were bright, you were in science. And I didn't like math. I passed it.
Mm-hmm.
So what course does a bright reader who doesn't like math do? Do the biological sciences, do medicine. I couldn't do pharmacy.
Why?
So much math. Once there's calculating, I could barely do chemistry and do buffering and all that jazz. Once I was able to pass chemistry, physics, but biology, I got a distinction. So that's how I got into medicine. Of course, medical school is not just reading. There's a lot of work there, and there's a lot of morbid curiosity where you are. It's life, really.
Yes.
So for me, I loved medicine. Writing was never really a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that I was interested. It was something that I was intrigued by.
Wow.
How does somebody write down 60,000 words? How does somebody have that discipline to sit down?
Yes.
So finished practicing finished medical school in 1999, 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for about a decade as a doctor, but halfway through that time, by 2005, I heard about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Yes.
I got Popular Hibiscus, read it. I was blown away. Then I just said, you know what, why not?
Yes, of course.
Then I started
why not?
writing. Then, of course, I slowly drifted away from medicine into writing. I never stopped it. Just slowly. Found out I was forgetting prescriptions, found out that I was losing interest. Then I got a job in the publishing house that discovered my writing.
Yes.
Ran it for a bit, outgrew that. You know, when you outgrow something, when you're getting older and you're not listening to instructions as much as you should. So my boss then said, why don't you start yours?
Yes, it's your time, yes.
Which was a nice way of sacking me or firing me. So I left there, founded Narrative Landscape Press with a friend. And that's how I left. So mine wasn't the classic story of you were forced to do this and you wanted to do that. No, I could do both.
Yeah.
I could do anything. So now and writing is a lot easier than medicine.
Very safe, huh?
Very safe, exactly. No Ebola in writing, no COVID in writing.
Yeah, that's nice. Yes. Let me to ask you about your novel, Fine Boy. Tell us about it. The characters, how you write it. How much time it take until you finish?
That is hard.
It is like first novel,
No, second novel.
the second one. Okay.
First novel we don't talk about. Very bad. Although I apologize to the fans of the first novel, I liked it. But it was the first novel was alternate history, speculative fiction. So I was just looking at the history of Africa, and it was me learning. The second novel was more personal, and it was not a genre novel. It was a coming of age story, and it was set. So there's this thing that a friend of mine, Biavanga Wainaina, the late Kenyan writer, called the post-Biafran generation for Nigeria. I think the rest of the world is what you would call Generation X. These were people who were born in the late 60s and through the 70s, who became aware of life after the Nigerian Civil War. I think that's our own generational marker. For several other countries, it's other things. There's a post-independence generation, there's a post-crisis generation, there's a Generation X. So for us, it's the post-Biafran generation. So when I read Purple Hibiscus, I usually say that it gave me permission to write, because it told me that my generation were now given permission to speak. Because before then, what was called contemporary Nigerian or African fiction were novels that were 30, 20 years removed from me. They were important novels: Things Fall Apart, Arrow of God, the different novelists from the African Writers series. They were important novels, but they were slightly distant from my own experience. The battles that they fought were slightly different from what I was seeing. My battles were closely related, but they were successor battles. And even though the curriculum in school said you need to read this to understand African literature, they were slightly removed. And my generation, as I'm sure yours, we were interested in films, in slightly faster novels, in thrillers, and also in slightly different conversations. So there's this thing that's, was it Toni Morrison said, if you do not see the novel you want to read, I paraphrase, of course, I might be wrong, go and write your own.
Yes, of course.
So after the first novel, I picked up, I started working on this deeply personal novel about young men and women in 1990s Nigeria, mostly in their late teens and early 20s. The issues with the university gangs. So there was this fraternities or confraternities or sororities like the Americans have them, but in Nigeria they have been corrupted and have become really violent. People give big reasons why. They said it was the military era, they said it was politics. I just think it was idle minds not being put to use, and also a warped system of policing them that actually worsened them. Instead of going after individual criminals, treating them and banning them, which make them more intriguing for young people to want to join. So that's what that novel was about. It was about Nigeria in the 90s. It was about the pro-democracy movement. That's the important stuff.
Yes.
But the fun stuff, it was just about young people discovering themselves. So the main character, Ewine, it's a Benin name. I'm Benin, not the country, the city, or Edo. And it's an Edo name that means wisdom. The full name is Ewine Siha. Wisdom is better than wealth. But he's not a very wise character. He's not that wise. But he grows up. Parents are from different ethnic groups, as many of us in this colonial constructs that we call nations are. People are from different nations that would have existed on their own but forced to become one country, and people must fall in love. So you have parents from different tribes or ethnic groups, as I prefer to call them. So it's a child of an intertribal union, and he speaks only English. Because it's common in Nigeria. Many of the children born post-independence, born from inter-ethnic unions, speak the language of the marketplace, which is English. And they exist. So it was from that unique perspective that I wanted to write this novel. How do these people see the world? How do they examine the question of nationhood? How do they hold, and if anything goes wrong, whom do they choose? Nigeria or the ethnic groups of their parents? And this was all subtext, because the main story was just trying to survive 4 years in a Nigerian university. So they have friends, of course you have the class clown, you have the friend who always wants to do the wrong thing, and and it ends with consequence.
Yes, of
for
course.
for the characters.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, it's good.
I should read it.
Yes, you must. And if you can push for an Arabic translation, I'll be so honored.
I will try.
Yes.
Really, I'll do my best.
Yes.
Because when I say no, yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So I want to read about it.
Yes.
One of our friends, we take his, he is written in Arabic, he's from Chad country. He's written in Arabic. He's very fantastic way. He's opened our eyes about his country, or his culture.
Yes.
So it's good, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Let me ask you about your publishing company. That's Narrative Landscape Press. What a challenge you fight, and you still doing with it, and how it's easy or
And
not?
our successes too.
Yes, of course, of course.
So we founded Narrative Landscape Press in 2016. It wasn't my idea; it was a friend's idea. And
He's a writer?
No, she's an editor.
She's an editor.
Yeah, she edited. She worked on my first novel.
Mm-hmm.
And so she came to me and said that, why don't we do this? And I think it was based on the idea that so everything in Nigeria kind of fell apart in the 80s. The way it happened across most countries because of the debt crisis that came out of Mexico and Brazil. It hit everybody in a tsunami. And I think it fell after the American crisis in the 70s. Then once they were recovering, the rest of the world dipped into crisis. So most of the publishing companies in Nigeria, everywhere, they fell. And they focused instead on educational publishing or newspaper publishing, which was still difficult.
Yes.
So when the 2000s came, with the return to democracy, the publishing companies started finding their feet, but not from the old companies. Independent fans of old publishing started founding new companies. And slowly there was an interest in Nigerian writing. People were coming out, there was a lot of voices. But the fact was that people like Anwuli Ojogun, who had the idea, who came to me with the idea, she was a staff of one of those first companies in the early 2000s. And what we had found was that the skills that we were rediscovering, there was a high demand for them. And many books were getting published badly.
Yes.
So we had no money to found a publishing company. So instead, what we founded was a publisher services company. So Narrative Landscape Press was initially founded to provide editing, design, and print project management to independent presses, entities,
it's very important for any writer.
exactly, and also to independent writers. But the dream was always to publish books eventually. So we started as a publishing services company, slowly grew our capital by sweat capital, by bootstrapping, which is you are pulling up yourself. And by 2018 was when we eventually launched our own publishing imprint.
Yeah.
Which was, and that was because we got the rights to publish Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's novels in Nigeria, all 5 of them, all of 6 of our books, 3 novels, 1 collection of short stories, and two essays. And we've never looked back since. So we still have the 2 business channels, publishing services, which we offer to other publishers, and our own books. And our dream is always our own books, because slowly the need for the publisher services is reducing as more people develop their own capacity. So in terms of challenges, it's always that money. It's always money. Where do you get the capital to throw at what most likely will lose money? Because the thing about trade publishing and fiction, poetry, drama is that the business model is very weird. So you may have a catalog of maybe 40 titles, and it is 5 titles that are holding everybody up. But if you do not keep on looking for titles, you will not see a 6th title. So you might get 7 titles that are important, that are good, but they will make no money. But it's important that it is done. Then you have your stars who carry everybody. It's a weird publishing model. A strict businessman will say, cut the other ones and focus on this. But if you do that, nobody will pay attention to the important titles if they do not see the other titles that bolster it. It is the same logic behind our foray into educational books. If we do not do our fiction, our creative non-fiction, and other books, we will have no bona fides, we will have no confidence to claim that we are doing a social studies textbook that anybody will take seriously, or a French for English children's textbook that anybody would take seriously. So that's the idea. So one is prestige. It superficially seems to be losing money, but it's important that you do that so that you have market share for the books that actually bring you money. So it's been very difficult having to discover this, but that's what we've been doing. We've slowly found our feet. We've slowly tried to walk around piracy, which is a problem in Nigeria. Pirated titles, people printing your books in China and smuggling them in, or in Asia. So it's one of those difficult where people think it is a victimless crime. After all, nobody died. But you're like, but that's my book. Why is it in your shop? But slowly, with education, with the work we are doing with Afreximbank and CANEX, we are able to get ourselves into a position of advocacy, of trying to tell people that this is how much value there is in what we are creating. We are beginning to work on film rights, on subsidiary rights, film rights, translation, on being able to develop the intellectual property to a stage where we can actually use it to trade. There's been a recent flood of new laws across the continent in intellectual property securitization. That's the ability to use your IP to do business, to fund a loan, to recognize it as a movable asset, to recognize it as, most people thought it was just about being able to take a loan with your film rights, which is much more than that. It's being able to have people invest and own part of your own intellectual property. So it's exciting, the things that can happen. But it all depends on an entire value chain being recognized and being supported. So that's why we're excited by the work we do with African institutions like Afreximbank, the Trade Bank, being able to notice that following those laws that were enacted, I think in 2017 in Nigeria, 2017 in Kenya, and several other countries, that is a point of contact in which they can advocate for business between the continent's countries. So that's what it's been like.
I want to ask you if you are to contribute to the Arabic exhibitions writers before or not, like in Cairo and Sharjah.
In Sharjah, Amuli has been there. She was there last year.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So she's been there. So we've been there, and one of our very close friends works with Sharjah, and I think they're doing an African Publishers Fair. This year or is it next year in Sharjah? So we will always go where the business is.
Let me ask you, Mr. Eghosa, about what kind of relationship you have with landscape, narrative landscape, with the CANEX company.
So we're friends and partners. So CANEX comes from Creative African Nexus. I think it was Creative African Nexus. So I think it was created by Afreximbank. It's an initiative of Afreximbank, although they've recently made it into a proper business entity. It was an initiative of Afreximbank to provide support for the creative industries, for the creative sector, across all genres, from film, music, culture, painting, everything. And it was related to, like I said, the securitization of movable asset laws that occurred across the continent in 2015 to 2017. So it started in 2020, I think, or 2019 or 2020, and was supposed to launch at Durban, at the Inter-Africa Trade Fair in Durban in 2020. But of course, COVID. So it launched in November. It launched in November in 2021. And they have this CANEX weekend in the intervening years, because the Inter-Africa Trade Fair, which Afreximbank runs, occurs every 2 years. So in the gap years, they have a CANEX weekend where creatives from across the continent meet in the city that will eventually host the trade fair the next year. Then in the trade fair, they have something called the CANEX Summit. Now it is more than just a jamboree and dance. It's about the bank and other business people coming to a place where they can listen to creatives, where deals can be struck, where opportunities abound. So when CANEX said that they wanted to expand the efforts beyond the superficially seen into books, I think because one of the issues with books is that publishing can be an orphan child of both education,
Yeah.
culture, and entertainment. So by the time you go to education, they'll say, oh no, those are novels, go to culture. By the time you go to culture, so that is for school, go to education. So CANEX recognized that and came to us and asked us if we would like to partner with them in conceptualizing a year-long program of events that will culminate at each CANEX weekend or CANEX summit.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, so what do you have in mind? They wanted to point a focus at the value chain from the writer's desk to the reader's eyes. So which means from writers to agents to publishers to booksellers and distributors to readers.
Yes, of
A way to raise everybody up. So that by doing that, Afreximbank will be able to see, listen to, and identify points of intervention for their risk assets. In banking, risk assets are loans or investments, things you put in at risk and the bank or institution earns money from.
Yes.
But also the customer is able to have liquidity to do business.
Awesome.
So that was it. So we came up with, after initially 5 programs, we cut it down to 3 programs, which are currently the CANEX prize for publishing in Africa,
Yes.
which is a publisher's prize, which is slightly different from a writer's prize. So this prize it recognizes the work that publishers put into a book. So we believe that with this, anthologies,
Yes.
collections of writing by different authors into a collection, which are never really up for any prize, can actually be presented. Editors and publishers can be praised. The finished book, the amount of detail, the amount of care into its manufacturing can be praised. So that's the CANEX prize for publishing in Africa, number 1. Number 2, for the writers, or it should actually be number 1, for the writers, the CANEX Creative Writing Workshop, which is a prose writing workshop for writers from around the continent, which is part of, that is how we met. Yeah, she's brilliant, by the way. So we have the CANEX prize for publishing in Africa, the CANEX Creative Writing Workshop for writers. And the difference with the CANEX Creative Writing Workshop is that unlike other writing workshops, it has 2 modules for accounting, for business accounting in publishing, so that writers can recognize how their royalties come about. And it also has a module on contract law, so that writers can better understand how to engage with publishers. Not so much as how to make them better advocates for themselves, but also to make them better advocates for the business as a whole. So that if a writer understands why it is 10 or 15% instead of 25%, you would understand how the revenue from a book is actually split. It makes them less naive and more capable of knowing the percentage points that they need to argue.
Yes.
So it also makes it easier for us, the publishers, if the writer is better educated in business. So those are the things. Then finally, the CANEX Book Factory newsletter, which is a quarterly newsletter, but of course it will have intermittent editions in between those quarterly flagship editions, where writing business news, creative news, publishing industry news, new opportunities, new investment opportunities, new titles, new books, and of course with every quarter with a note from the president of Afreximbank, an editor's note, saying that this is what's been happening in the last quarter, this is what we look forward to seeing in the next quarter. Something that can bring, like a trade magazine for African publishing, where African publishers can know to go and place their announcement. If you have a new book coming up, you send it, it is posted there. Free publicity, nobody's asking you for a dime, fully sponsored. So with these 3 items, the writer's workshop, look at the value chain, writer to reader, the writer's workshop, the publishing newsletter, and the publishing prize. We believe that we are able to support the book value chain, because eventually, with the kind of information that Afreximbank gathers from this process every year, they will be able to do targeted loans, single digit, low interest, targeted investments in printing presses, targeted investments in literary agencies, targeted investments in book scouting, in literacy efforts, and everything, in writing workshops, in capacity building for the entire trade publishing value chain, the entire creative writing, specifically creative writing. We believe that educational publishing has its own support, which is individual governments are supporting their educational sector. And we believe that if we focus on the seemingly independent trade publishing sector, it will eventually diffuse into better books across board.
Yes, that's very important thing.
Yes, it is.
Yes. And really, I believe this workshop you are entering with you and your instructor, other instructor, is very different.
Yes.
It's like heavy, they are very serious, they are give out of homework, their evaluation, me and other colleagues, so to be good. Now I can just find another perspective.
Yes, it is.
For the same
For the same topic.
Yeah, same topic.
Yeah, different.
Wow, how they different thinking. Wow, I like it.
More than 14 countries.
Yes, I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes.
أعتقد إلى هنا أصل إلى ختام حلقتي مع الأستاذة إيغوسا. أتمنى أن تلتقي بي مرة أخرى في لقاء آخر. I think that's very lovely talking and
thank
very
so
informative. So I really want to thank you and appreciating your time. Finally, we are made it. I know you are so busy. So thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
to being one of my show.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
أما هنا يا أصدقائي دمتم في أمان الله.